Welcome to Study Loop.
In this example, we're working with really just thinking like an economist in terms of positive and normative statements that can be made. So we're given a series of statements, A through E, and we want to identify which category these fall into. But to start, let's identify or really define what positive and normative statements are. So positive economic statements focus mainly on the facts. Focuses on facts, on data, on statistics, and the way things are. That's the key part, is it focuses on just what is, essentially. On the other hand, normative statements tend to be more general. They may be more subjective. They may be based upon value statements. And again, most importantly, with normative statements as compared to the positives focus on what is, normative statements focus on what ought to be. So it's more of a suggestion. It's more of an implication, what ought to be within society or what ought to be done. So now that we have like just these basic definitions of the differences between positive and normative statements, let's classify which one of these each fall into. We'll start with A. And statement A says that a short-run trade-off between inflation and unemployment is faced by society. So it's just saying that one thing is faced by another. So it's just telling us something. It's not saying that something should be different or that something ought to be a certain way. It's just telling us what is. So we can classify A as a positive statement. Statement B here says that a reduction in the rate of inflation can be achieved by reducing the rate of money growth. So again, it's not saying here that a reduction in the rate of inflation should be achieved by any way. It's just saying that it can be. So that's not implying that anything should be done a certain way. It's just telling us a possibility. It's telling us what can exist and maybe what does exist. So statement B can be classified also as a positive statement. Statement C here says that the rate of money growth should be reduced by the Federal Reserve. And the key in statement C here is the word should. It's saying that something should be reduced. It's trying to suggest a solution, suggesting what ought to be. And so we can classify statement C as a normative statement. Statement D here says that society ought to require those receiving welfare benefits to look for employment. Well, that one seems pretty straightforward because it has that ought to. Society ought to do something. Remember, normative statements are statements that tell us what ought to be, what ought to exist. So we can go ahead and classify statement D also as a normative statement. Now finally, statement E, it says that more work and more saving is encouraged by lower tax rates. So this one's a little bit trickier because normative statements, like I said, they tend to sometimes encourage or suggest solutions. But in this case, it's not saying that we should encourage anything. It's just saying that something is in fact encouraged by lower tax rates. So because it's telling us that, that's really a factual basis. We could back that up with data if we wanted to. It's not telling us any way in which things should be done. It's just saying simply that more work and saving is encouraged by lower tax rates. So that's just some basic examples of how to classify these different phrases between positive and normative statements.